Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Eaglet Eye Ovitz webinar tonight, which is called When Precision Meets Innovation. And some people are still entering the webinar as guests, so I'll talk for a minute as more people come in. But we've got a great program tonight. I think you'll find it very interesting, and you'll learn a lot. And I think even those of us that are presenting will learn something too. It's always great. So thanks for being here, and we'll get started. So first of all, tonight's program is about the Eye Surface Profiler, which is a product of Eaglet Eye, as most of the attendees know, and the xwave Aberrometry system from Ovitz. And here you see a nice picture of both instruments. And we have four guests tonight that are going to be participating in the program. I'm the moderator. I'm Ted Newell with Eaglet Eye. Some of you know me that are in the audience because I saw the registration list earlier. But we also have Felix Kim, who's the founder and CEO of Ovitz. We have Barry Leonard out of Southern California from the Leonard and Associates practice that also is the center for the California Keratoconus Center in Panorama City, California. So Barry's with us tonight. We have Sheila Morrison from Calgary, Canada. Sheila is practicing at Mission Eye Care with a great team of people up there. And she's a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry and also a fellow of the Scleral Lens Education Society. And finally, we have Aaron Wolf out of Austin, Texas, where he has the Austin Optometry Group and the Texas Specialty Eye Center, which is sort of a new development for him. And he's also a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry, a fellow of the Scleral Lens Education Society, and a fellow of the FIAOMC. I'm not going to try to say it all because I'll probably mess it up, and I don't want to do that. But 3 fellowships. Good for you, Aaron. So these 3 doctors and Felix are going to have a great program tonight. Like I said, it's going to be very interesting. So first, we'll talk a little bit about the eye surface profiler, but we don't want to spend a lot of time because we don't want to take away from the other presenters. First of all, it's Fourier transformation technology. And by that, we throw a pattern down in the eye with 2 cobalt blue lights. That pattern is excited because we've instilled fluorescein in the eye with a lubricating drop that has hyaluronic acid, and we get back about 500,000 data points of height data, and we create a 3-dimensional map from that. So it's fast, light blue light, doesn't really bother the patient at all. We get lots of data, scleral and limbus and cornea, out to about 20 millimeters in diameter. And we have a lot of really advanced algorithms that we use ourselves to analyze the data, but we also use in coordination with the labs and the makers of all these lenses to make sure we can get a good prescription for you and get a good fit. So what we're trying to do, our goal is to streamline the fitting process. And so we want to help you take a scan quickly. We want to analyze the data with our software. Then we want to reach into the cloud with our software and grab the algorithms from the labs. And we then come back into our software with what their prescription recommendation is. And finally, we want to help you order the lens. So you click a couple buttons and a prescription form for many of the labs comes up, preloaded, and all the information's there. And for some other labs that use their own software to help you design the lens, we actually download our data into the software that's resident on your computer, and then you can go to work on designing a lens. So we're trying to make this whole process easy for you. And we're working in a lot of different areas. Most people know us for having developed a product that really helps fit scleral lenses, but that's not all that we do. So right here is where I would almost say this is the first, for those of you that aren't familiar with profilometry, or which is also corneal scleral topography, so it's a topographer. If you look at this image, you see the center of the image, that's the cornea, and then the outer area is the sclera. And over here, if you can see my cursor, that is the beginning of a little pinguicula there. And for many people that see this for the first time, I say this is the first part of the magic behind the science, excuse me, of the ESP. And that is, for many doctors, this is the first time they've seen their clinical challenge. In the past, they've been trying to guess at it, but now you can see it. And so these other images are the same. Down here, the bilateral keratoplasty, eyes, you see the cornea, you see the sclera, you see your clinical challenge. And that's the first part of the magic behind the science of the eye surface profiler. And we can do a lot of things, as you can see from these slides. But then we've also moved into working with other lens designs like GP lenses, Ortho K, the translimbal Ortho K, the freeform Ortho K. We don't have listed here as hybrids and softs. We can work with a lot of other different lens designs to help streamline the lens practice. And so we're trying to drive practice growth and efficiency. So if we can reduce chair time by up to about 50%, patients are happier because they're not coming to your practice as often and spending all that time driving there, maybe with a loved one. They can also attract new patients. We hear that people find out about the ESP on different social media platforms like Reddit and Instagram and Facebook and so on. And the typical ROI is less than a year for most practices. We're trying to lead to improved outcomes, which is great because you get better comfort, longer wear time, better vision correction. As Melissa Barnett from UC Davis says, that when she started using the ESP on refits, the patients told her that they were more comfortable in the refits than they were in the original fit. So her point was you can always do better. And finally, we're trying to enable procedural improvements with a single shot, a single solution for a lot of lenses. It's easy to learn, easy to use, and it takes you into the area of freeform lenses because with this data, you can now work with freeform lenses, and you need this data to do that. And that's sort of a good segue into the whole subject area of higher order aberrations because we really need a precise scleral measurement. We need a precise fit upon which to build another lens that resolves a higher order aberration problem, of which there are several. So start with a good fit. We don't want that lens to rotate. Some people say 5 degrees, some people say less, but you don't want the lens to rotate or it messes up the work that you've done to create another lens that solves the higher order aberration challenge. So that's where we start. Good fit, good start. And then if the patient still has a problem, they're 20/20 unhappy, is how some people define it. Now it's time to talk to them about resolving a potential problem with higher order aberrations. And that's where I'm going to turn it over to Felix Kim with the xwave Aberrometry system.
Thanks, Ted. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Felix Kim. I'm the CEO of Ovitz. I'm excited to give you a quick overview of the Ovitz xwave Aberrometry system and our HVAC correcting technology. I will cover how it enhances your patient's vision and how it can help build and differentiate your specialty contact lens practice. I'll keep it short for the sake of our cool case report waiting after this. So let's start with something we've all seen or heard from patients. Blurry night driving, halo, ghosting, glare, even after a perfect refraction. Not all vision complaints are refractive in nature, as you know. Many of you probably have patients who still complain of weird vision, especially at night, or maybe you've experienced these symptoms yourself. These are classic signs of higher order aberrations, HOA, and they often go undetected and unaddressed in standard exams. And good news is they can be measured and understood and corrected now. So how does it work? It actually a simple 3-step process. First step, measurement. you take an Ovitz xwave aberrometry scan over the final fit stable scleral lens. And the second step is analysis and design. Once you submit that scan data to Ovitz, our proprietary AI-based algorithm designs personalized H-ray optics based on the scan. And the final step is you get the final lens, a new lens with the same fit, but now enhanced with Ovitz custom H-ray optics is manufactured and shipped directly to you. It's pretty fast and seamless and designed to fit right into your specialty lens workflow. So, and what does it mean for your patients? You can see it here visually. This is a simulated view of H-ray effective vision compared to corrected vision. This isn't a subtle change. It's a game changer for many patients. Many patients describe it as life-changing, saying they never imagined they could see this clearly again, or in some cases for the first time ever. Even patients whose vision had gradually degraded are often shocked by the clarity they can now see and achieve. So the Ovitz xwave also gives you powerful but also easy to use data. You get a full wavefront map, as you can see here, individual H-ray values and all the visuals that make it easy to understand and just as importantly, easy for patient to understand. This helps with patient education and communication and case acceptance. Also, most importantly, with the click a button that you see in the red box here, all the necessary data is transferred to the Ovitz and lab for designing of the H-ray optics. So you don't need to deal with all the data exporting, emailing, faxing, and calling. So you don't need to be a wavefront expert. We built this to be accessible, super easy to use, and clinically relevant. So why choose the Ovitz xwave Aberrometer? There are several compelling reasons. Number one is a purpose-built to do one thing best, H-ray correction. We designed this system with clinical use in mind, from the streamlined measurement process to our one-click lens order system. Our system also balances sensor sensitivity and resolution for reliable and actionable scan data. And also it's clinically actionable, as I can imply earlier. You get the data you need, not an overwhelming dashboard full of irrelevant numbers. Other Aberrometer may be often be an all-in-one system, often complex and not so intuitive. But we try to make it very clinically relevant and actionable. And point three is affordable. We focus on essential features, not bells and whistles, and 100% focus on making it fast for H-ray correction only. Our system was built to be used, not shelved. And also, the most importantly, advanced H-ray design algorithm. We don't stop at data collection and data presentation on the dashboard. Our team and proprietary data-driven AI algorithm design the optics for you for the best visual outcome possible. And last but not least, lens compatibility. Ovitz H-ray optics can be added to most major scleral lens design you may choose. That means that you don't need to change what's already working, just enhance the lens. So that's about it. And so the last slide here is, so why are we here today with Eaglet Eye? Why is it combining the ESP and Ovitz xwave system such a powerful pairing? Just like Tad said earlier, because to get the best results with H-ray correction, you first need a stable scleral lens fit. H-rays are very sensitive to lens displacement and rotation. The eye surface profiler lets you fully customize the back surface of the lens, ensuring stability, which is really, really important. Once you have that stable foundation, you can confidently layer on a full optical customization, H-ray optics on the front surface of that lens. So now let's hear from some of our doctors who are using both technology together, starting with Dr. Barry Leonard.
All right, thank you, Felix. I'm Barry Leonard, optometrist, as I said, in Southern California. And let me see if I can advance this slide here. There we go. And I think, before I start on this case, one thing Ted said at the very beginning is really what hit home to me a while ago. And I think some of the other people on the panel, maybe out there and listening today, have been fitting sclerals for a long time before scleral profilometry was around. And, we all did a pretty good job, but it was the only part of the eye I didn't know the shape of. And we sort of, we used our art and our seat of the pants stuff, and we did pretty good, but we certainly can do a lot better with this technology. It's pretty neat to know the shape of the sclera that we're fitting. So this case is a 52-year-old woman, and interesting enough, she was worked at one of my local ophthalmology office as their outside LASIK rep, and she had her one eye done for distant vision and got ectasia. So it's sort of a bittersweet kind of thing. And so they tried an enhancement and this and that, but she just had ectasia and was not doing well. So they came to me and said, you got to get her to see better. We can't have her out there being our rep and not be, and don't tell anybody that we're putting a scleral lens on her. But it got worse and worse, and it came over her. You could see that right eye refraction down the bottom left, 20/60 best vision. The other eye was monovision, the perfect, and still okay because it had not been touched. And a lot of irregular astigmatism, a bunch of HOA, which we'll see coming up. And so we used the first step was taking our scans with the eaglet. And we need to, as Felix was saying in that, we need to get a good fit of a lens, and especially on these, we've got keratoconus, which is one thing, and then these ectasias and arcays, and that's a whole nother thing, as we all know. When we look at these scans, and I think some of you out there are using ESP and others are new to this, the colors are telling us certain things. The blue is very deep and steep in that area, and the reds on the sclera are more flat. And you can see that's sort of all blue on one side and not blue on the other. And that'll show up here. What we have to look at, there's a very good nomogram, which I think most of us on the panel just sort of have this is stuck on our head now. But it's a good tool to look at, and we can look at any cord length that we get and determine what kind of a lens that we need for this patient. And basically, if we look somewhere around 12.5 or 13, depending on the lens, that's where that lens is landing on the limbus. And we can look at that shape first to see how much eccentricity is out there, or how much irregularity in that sclera shape. We come out to 15 millimeters, which is more the mid periphery. And in this case, if we work our way down, which is highlighted in the green, and we come down and we can see that we are pretty good in a spheric transition zone at the limbus, but we come out to 15 millimeters, where and the numbers are over on the side, but we're over 400 microns of difference. And that's going to tell us at that point, in this case, you can either go to a quad specific lens, which I'm not real happy with any of those really personally, but I think in that case, we go to a freeform lens and get a great fitting lens. And other patients, and I think we'll talk about them later, are going to head down different paths of this nomogram, but to determine what kind of lens we're going to design. And here's, we've got the good fitting lens, which we used in this case, a freeform Gaudi. Back in that time, we were more limited to what labs also. So they were one of the first freeform lenses that we could use this technology. And this is I call an alignment lens. So there's all those, we get that same fit lens as Felix was saying. It's the same exact good fitting lens that we were satisfied with. We then ask for alignment lens from the lab, which comes in with all these dots. And then we're going to scan that lens with the Ovitz Aberrometer, as was told before. There's that good fit. And we get that wavefront map. And that, when you start looking at them, that shows some not good wavefronts, but this is where we can really show what they are. I can't see the bottom of the screen, but this first big blue one there is a lot of coma and trefoil, which are the most common aberrations we're gonna find in these type of patients. And this is a perfect tool to show the patient. Look at this. There's those lines are large. We got to reduce those. That's why you have these issues that you're talking about, the glare and the flare and the night vision problems. And this is before and after, which is real nice. With the system, you can put in, the base lens, you can put in you can just put the straight aberrometry on the eye, and you can compare all these. You can have more than these two. But here we have the base lens in blue, and then the final HOA lens in that other color, that ochre color. And you can see the reduction that we've had in those things, and got a very satisfied patient. I don't think I have the numbers, but she got down to 20/20, happy, no more HOA symptoms, and that's what we're after in these lenses. So I think we'll move on to Sheila.
Great. Well, thanks so much for that case. That was great. I have a question for you, Barry. When you're measuring for HOA, because I do want to talk a little bit about candidacy and why we chose, well, for my case, I'll explain it shortly. When are you actually screening patients for the need for HOA? Because you've been using this tool for a long, long time. Are you screening patients when they're 20/20 happy? Are you screening patients, all patients, or just some of your patients for HOA correction?
Well, in my practice, before we have Ovitz, I also have the Marco OPD, which also has an aberrometer in it. So every patient that walks in our door gets wavefront topography, autorefraction, everything. And so that's how we're screening. But I think, if you don't have that aberrometer, I think you just got to make when's the decision to put them on the Ovitz and screen them. It doesn't take that long at all, and get that data.
Love that. I want to talk a little bit first about candidacy because, I used to actually reserve thinking about using HOA corrective lenses for patients that are, really, really desperate. And my case is a case of desperation. You'll see in a second that the case I'm going to share is about a patient that kind of got to the end of her line. But what I'm finding in the clinic, now that we've had the Ovitz for a period of time, there is so much utility in screening patients, not only the ones that are really desperate without solutions, but like you mentioned, one of you have already said today, just to improve, to do better. Felix, that might have been you. Ted, that might have been you. Barry, your case is an example of that, where we're getting patients to a certain level of vision that's really quite good, but they don't know different. And so even folks that have, fairly good vision without huge complaints, I'm finding that when we are screening these people and screening more patients, in fact, I'm quite certain that Dr. Wolf will talk about his process, including screenings for a lot of patients that he sees. There's a lot of patients that will benefit, not just the ones with high amounts of aberration, like some of these really kind of cool cases, but, we're screening a lot of patients now in our clinic and finding utility, and at least, if nothing else, explaining to people exactly why they're seeing that starburst and giving them the option of the highest level of technology. So I want to set the stage for my patient. So this is a really cool case. So she is a 24-year-old female. She was referred into our clinic from another province. So I'm practicing in Canada. She is, not a drive away. She's a plane ride away. And her history was remarkable for keratoconus, likely secondary to her Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder that has a high, we'll say, comorbidity with keratoconus, among other systemic issues. This patient, up until she was about 21-ish, she had no visual problems whatsoever. And then all of a sudden, things just really fell apart for her. She lost her vision very quickly. And to manage this, her care team did wavefront PRK. So we see this where we're getting, during the time that we corneal crosslink, some surgeons are going ahead and doing PRK to try to kind of make the very best of the situation. So she ended up with, very irregular, ectatic, thin corneas. And her chief complaint being, actually, interestingly, and this is kind of part of in any of these education sessions, we are here to talk about the eaglet. We're here to talk about our Ovitz and all of these, how we put these tools together. I also want to share a few clinical pearls. And so her chief complaint actually was monocular diplopia and ghosting, but in her life, her biggest concern was nausea, felt like the world was moving really quickly. This wasn't the case when she was younger. Now, we know that those are not typical symptoms of keratoconus. Patients that have ectasia don't often present with this kind of balance issues all of a sudden and nausea. And so the first thing that we did with this patient, she had approached us with a referral coming from out of town with a history of being fit with standard scleral lenses with front surface toric design that were not successful in resolving her monocular diplopia and ghosting. However, we still had to have the conversation with her because right away I was triggered to think, I don't know if we're going to be able to solve this woman's problems by giving her a clear picture in her eyes. Again, that movement of the world, nausea, that really clued me off that there could be something else going on. And so knowing that, having that conversation, also setting expectations, I think when we're considering HOA corrective lenses is really, really important. So not only for this patient where we sat down and talked a little bit about, well, keratoconus doesn't typically present with nausea and the world is all running around you and really just losing your balance, but also the reality that our goal with HOA corrective lenses, because she has very high anxiety, 24 years old and hadn't been able to work or go to school now for a couple of years because her vision had fallen apart. Her expectations and dreams were just so big for this technology. And the technology works very, very well to largely eliminate and reduce those ghosts and halos in many patients. But sometimes, there's always going to be, our goal is not necessarily to eliminate 100%, and success is considered improvement. So that's kind of setting the stage. Knowing that, she decided she wanted to proceed more than anything. She was ready to move ahead. So we brought her in for a fit. And the way that it works in our practice, we do kind of sometimes for patients that come in from out of town, a kind of a boutique style fit where we give them, they'll stay in the area for a number of days. And the really cool thing about using digital technology, partnering the ESP, which can empirically design the shape of a lens very, very quickly in a freeform style, and partnered with the HOA correction with Ovitz, is that we're able to generate really exceptional lenses in a very short amount of time. And so this patient traveled to Calgary, got a hotel, and came in for her first set of measurements. So I want to share them with you. Our first step at our office is to really perform a full evaluation of a patient's candidacy for not only just sclerals. She was referred to me with, these complaints of having a, failed scleral fit. That being said, we still do all of our own testing, and we start off by measuring comprehensive ocular shape in the clinic. And we do this using a variety of different, tools, including corneal thickness. And here is our ESP scan showing a single shot, so there's no stitching. These images are taken just with a single click and no extrapolation. And these maps show what an example of against the rule scleral toricity. And then inside is irregular cornea. So using this data is how we can start to get an idea of exactly what we're faced. Now, in this case, this patient, based on scleral shape, doesn't look too crazy. It's not, freeform can be used on highly irregular eyes. Freeform can be used on eyes that are spherical. So looking at ocular shape, to me, really don't need some crazy, wild shape to be thinking freeform. Think freeform almost, as a possible option 100% of the time. And in this case, because the patient had traveled in from out of town, we wanted fast results. She's only staying for like 2 weeks in a row just to try to get this whole thing done as quickly as we can. And that being said, it's not always possible with labs. You got to check with your labs ahead of time to find out, hey, I'm thinking of scheduling this patient for this boutique style fit. What do you have going on in the lab at that time? Are you having people out of town? Are you going to have the bandwidth in the lab to turn lenses around quickly? And in this case, we had pre-booked this patient with our lab partners to be able to do this. Now, advantage, of course, being when we come in from out of town, choosing a style that essentially eliminates that trial and error phase is really, really successful for patients that, in this case, so that's what we chose. We decided to fit her freeform. The lens was digitally designed from ESP data, and lens was designed, with essentially no fitting adjustments needed. Now, I have to say that in order to achieve this with any of our tools out there for designing lenses empirically, and that includes corneal lenses too, the quality of the data that you generate or that you collect will dictate the quality of the lens that comes out. And so as a starting point, making sure that we have high quality data like what you see here with really nice, full lids out of the way, the data is clean. There's actually now in the ESP this really cool feature that's built into the software that gives us a summary or a basically quality control measurements saying, what is the coverage looking like? Is the quality high? Is it a certain percentage? And so we actually, our staff are trained to take images until they have the high enough quality that I need to be able to design any kind of contact lens with high quality data coming in. Now, in this case, I also want to go through the process of what normally happens when fitting an HOA lens. Normally what we do is we would get in a starting lens, and that wouldn't always have our fitting dots on it right away. We need to have a stable lens, and we need to have the best distance correction in a lens before we can go on to the HOA step. Now, in this case, the patient was just so excited about it, so anxious, did not want to spend time in Calgary. We kind of just went for it. And so we ordered a set of lenses in with just one set to start, had really good distance vision, lenses were nice and stable. So her second lens was already the fitting lens. Sometimes it takes a third lens, but here we were with a really quick process. And I want to show you what those lenses looked like. So very similar to what Dr. Leonard just showed us, although every lab has a slightly different way of putting the markings on it. I noticed that, Barry, on yours, some of those markings were kind of that sort of creamy white color. They were almost just laser marks. These ones happen to be darker, and you can see they're all over the lens. And the reason that we have to have these marking lenses for any of our manufacturers is so that they can precisely measure exactly where on that pupil or over the visual axis that HOA optic has to be placed. And it is essential to have the lens stable so that when they place that HOA optic, it's in the exact right, precise position. Because if it isn't, or if it rotates, or if it's off to the side, when you think you're trying to help, if it's not right where you intend it to be, that will actually induce sometimes worse vision and create new aberrations that we don't want. So again, stability is really nice. And that's another really cool thing about freeform. You know, often we'll get that lock and key fit, even on an eye that's not highly asymmetrical, and achieve a stable fit almost right off the bat so that we can then place higher level optics onto the lens. Now, talking a little bit more about our screening process, before I order or put a patient into an HOA corrective lens, not in this case. In this case, we actually pretty much knew right off the bat. This was a patient absolutely knew that it may or may not help, and she wanted HOA. She was coming to us for HOA. She didn't care, you know, whether it helped a little or a lot. She was 100% committed before she came to the city. Most of the time, what we do is we'll take a screening of patients wearing a best corrective distance or something close to that to screen. And typically, the values that we're looking at in the Ovitz Aberrometer, there is a number called the RMS value, and that is the number that Barry was talking about, or Dr. Leonard was talking about in his slides, where we have this level of aberration that was seen in these big bars or these high RMS values. And I think in yours it was blue. Is that true? Yeah, it's the blue bar that you saw in Dr. Leonard's figure, with the corrected ones really nice and short. Those blue bars have higher RMS numbers. Now, when we screen patients, we consider an RMS value of about a 0.4 or greater to be considered an eye that's, we'll say, a slam dunk, or somebody that is very likely to have benefit from an HOA corrective lens. Patients under a 0.4 doesn't mean they're not a candidate, but we're very cautious about recommending that design because the eye can actually tolerate a certain amount of aberration, and most patients are quite happy with those shorter, smaller RMS values. In this case, when we screened her the first time, on that first distance lens we ordered, her right eye RMS value was 1.12. It's ginormous. And on the left, 1.42. So that patient, using her HOA corrective lenses, so on the second set, we reduced from 1.12 to 0.7, which is a 38% reduction, and 1.42 to 0.45, which was a 69% reduction. So for this patient, she still had aberration. She still had a few kind of things in her vision that, you know, if she paid attention, she had a ghost, but a huge, huge improvement for this patient. Massively, massively better. And if you take a look at her bar graph, similar to Dr. Leonard, the blue is before treatment, and then you can see that the bars really tighten up into these nice, more visually tolerable levels of aberration that for her was just a massive improvement for her life. Here's what the lenses look like on the eye. So they're very pretty. And this, I wanted to make sure that I highlight a few other things. So when it comes to HOA optic lens adjustments, we really don't end up doing many changes. Now, this patient was highly anxious, didn't care about spending more money. She really just was kept on wanting to fiddle with these lenses. So we actually ended up doing 2 additional HOA optic lens adjustments. And in this case, this is more than what we would normally do. Normally with HOA, we do 1 round. Okay, we make 1 adjustment, call it, it's done then. And we also have to make sure to give a patient time for neuroadaptation. Now, with this patient, it did take her some time, and her vision was just awesome. She had the best vision. It really cleared majority of her ghosting and diplopia. Now, the thing I want to add to this case, here's the beautiful lens pictures, of course. These are beautiful. We have our right and left eye. And again, remember that this is a first lens fit, essentially, with using high quality ESP scans to digitally designed lenses that have been just absolutely, over the last 5 to 10 years, just the level of precision with our labs and all the efforts to be able to put digital data into lenses, it's just so good now. So lenses often will look like this. Now, in conclusion for this patient, she had a wonderful result, never had better vision. Her nausea and everything didn't go away. So what we've done now with her, she now has her best vision in each eye by itself. And she has been referred on to one of our colleagues in her province for vision therapy and binocular vision training. And so that then they can readdress the parts of the visual system they're not just the clearest vision. But without having the clear vision in each eye, the best vision possible, it's just a mess. And she is not able. So she wears these lenses for when she's doing all of her vision therapy exercises. And the last I talked to her was actually last week, and she's starting to do a lot better. Still has a lot of the symptoms. This is a lifelong thing for her. But overall, much better result with the HWave lenses. Hey, Jeff. So, and that's my case. So next we're going to move on and make sure that we leave time for Dr. Aaron. So in conclusion, again, these are wonderful tools in combining technology to really address patients' needs to reduce the ghosting, diplopia, and really delivering clear, stable vision so that they can function at a much higher level for their daily activities and also things that they're, aiming to do like vision therapy or working or whatever else. So with that, I'll pass it on to our very own Dr. Wolf to close the show with another wonderful case.
Thanks, Sheila. Yeah, so I'm Aaron Wolf. I practice in Central Texas, and let's see. Oh yeah, the arrows work. Okay. So this is a case of keratoconus, right? So, with the HOAs, we can target there's a lot of reasons that people will get HOA disturbances, but really with scleral lenses, keratoconus is still kind of our bread and butter. So this is the one you're going to be doing the most of. This was one from a couple years ago, young patient, keratoconus in both eyes, cross-linking both eyes, pretty significant HOA complaints. And let's see, there we go. The main challenge in this particular case, I'm hoping, sorry guys, make sure I didn't skip a slide there, is essentially, I think Barry may have touched on this a little bit on his case and the shape of the eye. This was one of those where there just wasn't much toricity or wasn't much elevation change in this particular eye once we did the eaglet maps. And as Barry mentioned, we've been fitting scleral lenses for so long, but we really didn't know what the shape of the eye was. There was no way to really visualize it. No matter how good you were at fitting lenses, you're kind of guessing a little bit or deducing a little bit based on what a lens looked like on the eye. So once we got those initial maps, it's really illuminating to see how much or how little shape there is. And you just really can't predict it until you get those maps. This patient was one that only had about 100 microns of change at about 15 millimeters. The reason 15 millimeters is kind of a pretty good rule of thumb chord to measure at is that's generally going to be about the middle of a landing zone for most any lens, whether it's a kind of a smaller, medium, large size lens. 15 millimeters is going to be right there, kind of in that central kind of portion of that landing zone. Again, 500,000 data points, Ted mentioned that earlier, it's really a remarkable number, but that allows us to get information that can feed directly into various CAD systems to create these free-form lenses, which are going to allow a lens to stabilize on even an eye with very little elevation change. So this is a map of the right eye. Like Barry's case, I also use the Gaudi lens, which has just been a really wonderful lens. The freeform lenses, we talked so much about these freeform lenses, but I don't know if we really touched on what exactly a freeform lens is. And many of the clinicians in here probably, may have some idea, but in case anybody doesn't, a freeform lens is basically a lens that's not following any rules or rules of symmetry in the design. So most of our scleral lenses, they're kind of pre designed or manufactured in a symmetrical fashion. So you have like toricity, or Barry also mentioned these quadrant specific lenses, but there's way more than two or way more than four main areas of the eye. I mean, there's really hundreds. So a freeform lens essentially throws all that out, and then it's going to take the elevation map and it can either, depending on the lab that you're working with or the lens that you're working with, it'll either send that to the lab. The lab will design you a freeform lens based on their proprietary systems, or it may be more of a CAD, computer-aided design system, such as one that I used, which will allow you to export directly into that. And then you get to align the lens directly to the eye and each individual kind of elevation change. What you're looking at is that 15 mm cord highlighted in blue is going to be essentially your difference at that range. And 100 microns or 90 microns in this case is basically nothing. Okay. And when you look at the map, you'll see from around 8 o'clock, kind of going around clock hours all the way maybe to about 5 o'clock or so, there's just not much change in color. Okay, so the color is obviously representative of an elevation. That's a lot of a very similar kind of greenish tone. And when you look at the scale on the right, and you look at where the blue is, that shade of green and that shade of blue, they're just not very far apart from each other. Any kind of standard lens, it's going to probably, just spin. So we only have this little section, again, maybe from 5 o'clock to 7:30 or something, where it kind of dips down. But with this particular lens, you can actually set how sensitively you want the software to align to the eye, or the specificity, if you will. So in a situation like this, I cranked it essentially all the way up so we could catch whatever physical features we could on this lens, keep it stable. This is the other eye, very similar in features. This is just a different view of some the user interface with eGlit. So this is the quad map is what this is called, but you're going to basically have your infrared image, which will, as Sheila mentioned, it's going to give you some scoring metrics as to the quality of your scan. So your focus, how much of the eye did you actually map out? As far as how centered was your scan, and even movement, it's capturing in an instant, but whether the joystick is moving or the patient's eye moves, it's capturing all that data. So this is a good quality scan. Top right is going to be more of a quality assessment type of scan. The smoother, the better. Okay, that's basically also going to be somewhat reflective of your tear film quality. If there's any dry patches, which may indicate some or create some artifacts, you typically see it in that tangent angle scan. Bottom left is going to be your corneal elevation map. This is essentially just a traditional corneal topography feature here, but it is just an elevation map, as this is an elevation device. And then the bottom right is going to be like what you saw in the previous map. This is our standard kind of bisphere map, which is giving you a corneal best fit sphere and a scleral best fit sphere. So left eye, more or less about the same. Both eyes had very little toricity. And then really when you look at, a very clear kind of flat meridian, steep meridian, it gets a little bit messy over here with this eye. This is the lenses on the eye. I always like to use infrared imaging. I think infrared imaging is just hugely valuable in contact lens evaluation of really all sorts of contact lenses, but it's a great way to see the centration. That's obviously the bottom images here in black and white is your infrared. It's a great way to see the centration of the lens. It's also a good way to kind of get an idea of their scotopic pupil. If you have an instrument in your office that measures that quantitatively, then fantastic. But if you don't, this is a great way of looking at that and seeing, okay, how much glare maybe do I anticipate this person, might encounter with their nighttime pupils. Also, you can adjust the optic zones on many of these lenses, and just to make sure that your optic zones are getting wide enough that you're not inducing some of your own HOAs or interference into that scotopic pupil. And then the top picture, again, that's our traditional just photography. Just a beautiful aligned fit, very well centered, very well aligned, minimal rotation, which in our situation didn't really impact us. OCT scans just show perfect alignment there. And then this is the user interface version to the user with an Ovitz, and this would be the right eye. The blue, as Sheila mentioned, would be the before, and the orange would be the after. Okay, and then you can see the names. They'll have your Zernike coefficients numerically in parentheses, but it'll have the more common names there as well. And of course, with keratoconus, vertical coma is going to be that's going to be your culprit almost always. Okay, so the red line is a little bit small to read, but if you zoom in, or I'll just tell you, it says severe. So about 0.6 is going to be kind of that severe range, and you can see we were way beyond that. And then the green line is subclinical. Okay, you don't have to get all the way to the green. Okay, but if you get into the green, that's amazing. These are just fantastic results. And you can see the orange little bar paths, all of them, just almost nothing there. Left eye, same thing. We had some coma and trefoil. Okay, but again, the after results in orange is next to nothing. Okay, that is a really valuable tool. The Zernike plot is what that's called on the Ovitz software. My probably favorite way of looking at these and to explain it to patients outside of just long bar is bad, short bar is good, is the wavefront maps. Okay, the wavefront maps. I always describe it to patients that the more variation in color that you see is the more variation in the optics of the eye. And you don't generally want a lot of variation in the optics of your eye. Okay, you want it stable and consistent. And if you had no variation in color, that means that you had no variation in the optics. Okay, that would basically be perfect. Okay, and which is not totally attainable, but no variation would be a solid blue. Okay, you see it on that right, that 0 or something, be that solid shade of blue. That's a really, I think, powerful way to kind of help people understand their glare and then the improvement there. So we want to basically get as solid of a shade of blue as possible, and we were able to nail it on this one. The acuities 2025 and 2020 are excellent acuities for a patient with severe keratoconus. I think it's maybe worth noting that the best corrected acuities don't always necessarily need to equal 20/20 to have great vision. So you may not necessarily see a huge improvement in line of acuity over a more standard scleral lens, but you will notice an improved quality. So I don't remember what the best corrected acuity was on this right eye, maybe in the kind of alignment lens with the dots. It was probably something similar to 2025, maybe 2025 minus, could be 2030, but you're not going to get a multiple line improvement going from a standard lens to an HOA lens. But what you will get is little to no HOAs coming off that line. Okay, huge improvement as we mentioned. Conclusion, as already discussed, rotation, stability is everything. If that lens is going to move, I always describe it to patients that that wavefront map going back here is like a fingerprint. Okay, it's the fingerprint of your eye. Your right eye doesn't have the same fingerprint as your left eye. Your eye doesn't have the same fingerprint as mine or anybody else's. So what we're doing is basically we're designing an inverse fingerprint. So when it lines up perfectly, it subtracts. Thinking like noise canceling headphones, like what I have on right now. It's basically taking all that input, creating the equal but opposite input, and as long as they're lined up, then you get great results. So there's really very little tolerance for rotation. That is where the freeform lenses are really nice. Now, once you have your eaglet scan of the eye, you might find that there's a fair amount of toricity on this eye, in which case you may not necessarily need a freeform. There are other Ovitz compatible designs that are not specifically freeform, and they will work. They absolutely will work. But you do need a certain amount of toricity to make that work, okay? And with a freeform, you just have a little bit more leeway there, and we can, if we have time with questions, we might go back to Sheila and Barry to see kind of like at this point, how many of their patients are they doing in freeform? For me personally, almost all my patients now today are in freeform lenses.
Aaron, I have a pretty high percentage of freeform myself. I would say for sure, like, about maybe 60%. There is utility in all designs. I mean, that's the nice thing about the technology is as you mentioned, using the scan to understand ocular shape, then you can pull a starting lens from a fitting set if you wish to do it. For example, in our clinic, even when we fit freeform. My staff are trained to look at the scans on the ESP and pull a starting lens based on that shape to get power in patients that we've never seen before. When we design empirically, like my patient today, just because she was, ready to be on a roll, she could not tolerate a lot of motion and action. Getting the scans done was enough for her for one day. We actually pulled her prior base curve and power that we knew she had pretty good vision and rolled with that. So it really just depends. Barry, how about you? Are you high percentage freeform or somewhere in between?
Yeah, I'll probably be the outlier. I do probably the majority of my non-freeform. And because I think with the advent of these lenses that we can design with basically an oval limbal zone or bielevation or whatever you're going to call it, we're aligning, from the ESP data from that lens from the inside out. So majority of my fits are probably non-freeform. I think that was interesting that we all presented freeform tonight. I think next time we do it, maybe I'll throw in one of my others. But we have great success. It's just getting that good fit lens and whichever design you're going to use.
Ted, that leads into, there was a question in the chat that's directly related to what Dr. Leonard is saying. Did you want us to address that one for you?
Yes, let's take the chat questions.
Sure, yeah. So one of the questions, guys, and I'll just put this out to Dr. Wolf and Dr. Leonard. So to that point, let's talk a little bit about the process for screening for HOA. So the question is, do we need to have the dotted lens to be able to measure HOA, meaning that the patient would have to pay for that process to even know what their RMS value is?
Yeah, so I mean, what's the beauty of the Ovitz Aberrometer, you can use it on a cornea, just a naked cornea, to measure those HOAs. You can measure it over any scleral lens, non-dotted lens, to see what HOAs are left over. The dots are there for the Ovitz people, as you were saying, Sheila, to get the optics centered and in the perfect spot. That's the only time you need the dots. We use it for any screening purpose.
And I want to pull Dr. Wolf in because I love learning from the other speakers, I have to say. Half the reason I ask these questions. And Aaron, how many patients are you screening with your Aberrometer in your practice when you're fitting contacts?
Yeah, so I'm kind of similar to Barry. I actually have two different Hartmann-Shack Aberrometers in my practice as well. So every patient gets Aberrometry of all ages, right? So as soon as they can sit for the device, then they get it. Now that doesn't mean that we're going to use that in a scleral lens, right? So to me, Aberrometry is like so valuable in the application of scleral lenses, but it's stands alone, right? It is just clinical diagnostic information, like all these other devices. They work great together, but they don't have to work together. I just value Aberrometry as a visual information. If you think back, like what we're doing as optometrists, we are trying to measure vision. We're trying to improve vision, right? So acuity is kind of the thing everybody thinks about, like how small in an eye chart can you get? But we rarely talk about like quality of vision, and we don't really have a lot of metrics and devices to do that. Like if you're in a academic setting, you might have some like, spatial frequency stuff or contrast sensitivity, but the average practitioner does not have that. Aberrometry is one of those things that is kind of rare in that it is affordable to have an aberrometer in your practice just to get more visual measurement information. And it can be useful for determining like how significant are those cataracts exactly. Even something like anterior basement membrane dystrophy is something I see a lot in my office. It goes across the gauntlet there. But yeah, I measure everybody with Aberrometry. Kind of piggybacking on what Barry said, you can measure, with the eye over a previous non-HOA lens, over a diagnostic lens. I mean, you could do like all sorts of stuff. It's just going to give you that information. What I like to do from a I don't know, fitting rule is I always take the maps, and then from the maps I put a diagnostic lens on the eye that's kind of close to what their map is telling me. Like the eaglet will even basically suggest a diagnostic lens from your favorite diagnostic kits. I put the lens on the eye. I'm gonna have to do that anyways just to get refractive data. We're all doing that. And then from the refractive data, when they have their best corrected, over refraction over the lens, on my acuity chart, I just it happens to come with like a little white circle on a black background. I just turn off all the lights and I have them look at that with both eyes, looking through their over refraction. If you don't have that, maybe like a not particularly bright, like pin light or something, just kind of stand in the room and maybe just hold something like a pin light or whatever, even like your phone or something is going to have some light there. And then now they're looking through a scleral lens with their refraction that would be basically mimicking a normal scleral lens. And then they can tell you subjectively if it does or doesn't bother them. Because I'll tell you, and you probably notice this, everybody that comes in there with some kind of ectasia or keratoconus, they all complain about their HOAs. They all definitely think that they want, HOA correction. And I think I noticed this maybe in one of the chat questions is like, if you order a dotted lens and then they change their mind, they find that, hey, it really wasn't that bad. Are you committed to this or how that goes? Well, I would say, do this test first before ordering that dotted lens. And then I always ask them, is it bothersome or not? The question isn't, do you notice it or not? The question is it bothersome or not? If it's bothersome, yes, let's proceed. Let's get that dotted lens in. I would order that dotted lens on the very first lens and dive in. But sometimes, most of the time, it is still bothersome. But sometimes, just that basic lens was enough. And then, good. That's great. Then we don't have to go any further.
That's that whole last part of what you just said, including the process you follow in your clinic, is so on point that I think that every practitioner that just heard that, we all need to write that down and take that home because that was wonderful. And to your point of like, sometimes leave it, like, just because there's, we can all find that disturbance if they're happy, and it's not something that's affecting them. We've already done a lens and it's good, leave it. I love that. Now, kind of in closing, I want to check in with you guys is maybe Felix and Dr. Leonard has something to add.
Well, along what you're saying, I mean, the next time you get a glasses recheck and you're getting nowhere and you're on their third, retake, you can't figure it out, run an aberrometer. And, it can tell you a lot.
I love that.
It's not always contact lenses.
Yeah. Hey, Felix, one question for you or for anybody, either Dr. Leonard or Dr. Wolf. Does anybody have a chart or a table? So the question from Dr. Davila is there a chart that can be provided with how much HOA is mild, moderate, or severe?
So, go ahead, Dr. Wolf.
No, I think, Felix is going to have the clinical data. I think, the only thing I would say is one thing you want to look at is the pupil size, right? Because if you just look at a number, the number in and of itself is not going to mean that much. Like if you just pick a number, you say, hey, 6, is severe, and it is. But how often is that pupil in that fully dilated position or whatever? Like it's all a fluid kind of dynamic situation. But yeah, Felix, I'd love to hear your quantitative measurements and what y'all view to be kind of mild, moderate, severe.
Sure. Sorry, I don't have the answer for that or upfront. But there are two answers that I can provide, I guess. So one, when you're looking at our result page, when you're using our xwave Aberrometer, there are 2 lines that we are showing. One line is around the 0.15. It's a green line. We usually call that a subclinical. So if you see any individual high order aberration coefficient terms that are below 0.15, we see that as subclinical. That's probably not affecting vision any meaningful way. But if you see any single number that are above 0.6, we see that as severe. So it's very likely the patient or visions are disturbed, and we'll see significant improvement. But that said, it doesn't mean that if someone has like 0.3 or 0.4 of coma or spherical aberration or any of the single value, that doesn't mean that 0.3 and 0.4 are negligible. It also comes down to how sensitive the patients are. It's also patient by patient. So like when patients are complaining about their vision and you see like 0.3 here and 0.4 there, you want to have a conversation with your patient. And if they're complaining about their vision, it's probably that HOA that you want to kind of try to address and see how that improves. And of course, just like I mentioned earlier, you can also able to adjust the pupil sizes on the result page and be able to see different and how the HOA changes at under a different pupil size, and see if that correlates to what patients are experiencing it. And if patient is saying, hey, I have no issue during the day or in the office with bright light, but once I go into a lab setting or dark, or if I'm driving at night or playing sports indoor, that's when I start to have this issue. Okay, look at the set the pupil size larger on the result page and see if any of those high order aberration terms are getting larger, and that you can kind of have that conversation and have understanding of whether this is real HA effect or not.
Great.
So I'll offer this just in the sense that this is just what I like in a day-to-day conversation, with patients, right? Because patients, they need it. I don't want to use the word dumbed down, but they need it like in layman's kind of terms, right? So that's where that, Sheila, you mentioned the RMS. I think the RMS is a great kind of general numerical value that could mean something to a patient. So I typically tell them I have devices that measure the pupil size, right? And so I'll set the device to the scotopic pupil as per how that device measured it. And then I'll say, hey, if it's like 0.3, that's the number 0.3 to 0.4, but I usually say 0.3, somewhat for easy math here. Or less is really not going to bother most people. That's pretty good. That's like a normal eye. 0.3 to 0.6, like the next 0.3 step, that's going to be kind of annoying. It's like maybe not totally disruptive, but it's probably like noticeable. It may be something they don't like, but not usually something that they would like call to set an appointment about. And then basically 0.6 and up is considered severe, and that usually is something that's affecting them from a lifestyle standpoint. They're usually not wanting to drive around at nighttime as much, or maybe they let their spouse drive or whatever. They don't watch the movie in the total dark, that type of thing. So those 0.3 kind of steps, 3 to 6 and up, it generally works pretty well. It translates pretty well.
Hey, Aaron, one question that came up: are the residual HOA measured with 6 millimeter pupil diameter?
Well, the pupil diameter is going to be set based on your scan and how much usable data kind of you're getting. So like there's kind of two things here. When you actually use the xwave, it'll tell you the true pupil size based on the infrared kind of measurement of that pupil. But depending on the eye's condition, not all of that space may have really usable data. So therefore, when it goes to the user interface side, you may see a pupil size that is not really the true physiological pupil size, but maybe more the pupil of like captured good quality data. And it won't always be 6 millimeters. No, like it could be anything. It could be 4, 5, 7, like it could be whatever.
Great. Last question, I'm just going to answer it, and then we'll pass this over to Ted to take over any conclusions that you might have on behalf of EGLIT. So the question is, do you often see HOA more in one eye than the other? And I'm going to say yes. It really depends on pathology, depends on, what is going on. Often patients will have keratoconus that's more advanced in one eye. Maybe they've had an injury. It just really varies. And I would say some are similar between the eyes. I would say most, just for one reason or another, tend to be a little bit worse in the other eye. So it definitely can be both. Right. So Ted.
Yeah, and real quick, just on that note, that actually touches on something I had tried to say a minute ago. Maybe I went over pretty quick, but when you put the diagnostic lens on, I was kind of saying those like next like best practices here after doing this for a while. When you're doing the overrefraction, I always have them look binocularly at whatever target, because there's always going to be basically a dominant eye. Most of us experience some kind of eye dominance, right? So you're going to have one HOA that's worse than the other, but that dominant eye is probably taking over, and so they may be suppressing the eye to some extent that has the higher HOAs. Therefore, quantitatively it might be higher, but it may not necessarily translate to a lot of, I hate to use the word return on investment, but that kind of more like results type of return on investment. If they're kind of suppressing the worst eye and they're really kind of focusing with that lower HOA kind of better eye, then you may anticipate these wonderful, like this feedback and this you kind of blew their socks off, but that may not happen. So that's why it's important to kind of assess things binocularly, and then again, in my opinion, just ask, hey, binocularly, does this bother you or not?
Wonderful. On behalf of the speakers, I can know that I can speak for all three of us in that we are so honored to be part of this panel and to have time with all of you. So Ted, we'll pass that back over to you for any conclusions you may have.
Sure. I think the main thing I would say is that both Felix and I ran through our technology very, very quickly. And for those of you that are listening that have participated in one of our virtual demonstrations, you know it's about 45 minutes to an hour. So if there are people there that are not very familiar with our technology or the Ovitz technology, I would encourage you to get in touch with either one of the companies to ask for a virtual demo. It's easy for us to do. Otherwise, I'd just like to, I don't know, Felix, do you have any final comments?
No, I don't.
Okay.
One
I
last
just,
question that just came in, Ted. So
okay.
this is for Felix. Is Ovitz available in LATAM?
Please send us an email to info@ovitz.us. We'll discuss.
Okay. So I would like to echo what Sheila said. We really appreciate everybody's participation tonight. We appreciate those people that attended. Really, the three doctors, thank you very much for your case studies, your insights, your advice, and so on. And with that, I'd like to wish everybody a pleasant evening and look forward to seeing you sometime in the near future, if not online, at a meeting.